This is the video answer key for Accelerated Math Unit 4 Test Review Assignment number 3. Of all the students Mrs. Nichols has, 17 earned an A on their last math test. About 16.5% of Mrs. Nichols' students earned an A on their last math test. How many students does Mrs. Nichols have in total? So here's what we know. 17 students earned an A, and about 16.5% of the students earned an A. What I'm trying to find is how many students are there in total. So this is a great time to use that quantity equals percent times whole organization system. Here's what I know. If I think about all the students, that's got to be 100% of the students. Seventeen of them earned an A, and that 17% is about 17 students is about 16.5% of all the students. So let's map this out. I know that 16.5% represents the same thing as 17 people. And I want to find out what goes with 100 people. So if I set up my quantity equals percent times whole, I know that 17 has to be my quantity because it represents 16.5%. 100% always has to represent my whole. So I don't know the 100% value, so I'll put a question mark for my whole. But I know that my quantity has to be 17, and my percent is 16.5%, which I can write as 0.165. Once I know that information, it's easy to plug into my equation, Q equals PW. So Q is 17 equals P, which is 0.165, times my W, which I don't know, so I'll leave it as that variable W. To finish solving, I need to divide both sides by 0.165 to get W totally by itself. When I do this on the right-hand side, those coefficients cancel out and I just get W. On the left-hand side, I'm taking 17 divided by 0.165. And that gives me W equals 103.03 repeating. Well, I'm not going to have 0.03 repeating students. So I'm going to round to the nearest student, right? It says about 16.5%, about 103 students. I could have also solved this problem by setting up a proportion. If I had set up a proportion, I would have still needed to know all this same information. I just would have kind of set it up slightly differently. So here's what I would need to know. 16.5% corresponded to 17 students. 100% corresponded to some unknown number of students. Before I used W, this time I'm using X. That's okay. To solve this proportion, I'll need to cross multiply. So on one side, I'll have 16.5 times X, and I'll set that equal to 17 times 100. So I can simplify and say that 16.5x is equal to 1,700. And then I'll divide both sides by 16.5. And 1,700 divided by 16.5 should give us that same number of 103.03 repeating. Either one of these methods will work for you every single time, and the answer is 103 students.